Hey everybody, my name is Lucrezia from ESSEC Business School in Paris, France. I hope everyone is keeping warm on this chilly November afternoon, evening, depending wherever you are in the world. I'm currently in Prague, Czech Republic, doing the whole recruitment thing in probably a similar way that I've met many of you around the world. The class is shaping up nicely, and I'm very excited about the group that we're putting together this year at ESSEC for the Global MBA, as well as for the International Luxury Brand Management MBA. And this is the time of year where a lot of people are getting, to get thinking about their essays and working on their applications. So I thought it would be a great time to talk about some of the key things in writing an essay that's going to help you get shortlisted for that interview. By the way, for all of you who attended the webinar today, I'm going to offer application fee waiver, which will save you the 170 euros. That's applicable only for the Global MBA, unfortunately, not for the Luxury Brand Management or other programs. So for those of you who may be applying for the Global MBA, you can just email me and we can work out an application fee waiver for you. That'll save you the 170. And as a little bonus, there's a contest I'm having here. There's a minor error in the presentation, intentionally left there for you. If you catch it, email me, let me know what it was, what page it was on, and I will offer you a service of a pre-screening of your essays before you submit to give you some feedback. All right, so let's go with the presentation. So, first thing, and I think it's probably very obvious, but sometimes people, in all their nervousness, get a bit sidetracked. And so, first rule, the obvious one, be sure to answer the question. Now, for some MBA programs, the application is about you have a specific question you have to answer, and in some cases it's open-ended and they allow you to write whatever it is you want. But if there is a specific question, be sure to answer it. I write here, be creative but stay focused. I mean, feel free to delve into your thoughts and express yourself in a way that's interesting and tells a good narrative for you. But maintain staying on the point. Of course, any anecdotes that you make, try to make sure they tie back to the main point at hand, and be sure to wrap it up with a good concluding paragraph or line. Always a good idea, by the way, to weave in information that you know about the program, things you've gleaned from the website, conversations that you've had with recruitment managers or admissions officers, and tying that into your essay will show that you have a good understanding of what the program is about. That shows real interest, that shows that you're sincere, and that shows that you understand that what that particular program has to offer you is in alignment with what your needs are and what your goals are. Next, pretty simple one, but respecting the word count. So, on one side, we need some kind of substance. We want something that is showing what you're thinking, showing what your career goals are, and responding to the questions. You have to have something significant. At the same time, we don't want to read War and Peace. So there's a limited amount of time we have, and you can imagine the amount of essays that we're receiving. So most schools will give you some kind of indication as to what they're looking for, either a minimum, maximum, or average word count. So pay attention to that. Usually it's indicated right at the top, and if they ask for maximum 600 words, be sure not to write more than 600 words. I mean, okay, if it goes over one or two words, it's probably not a big deal. I'm not sure if they're counting, but to be safe, might as well stay under what they ask for. So yeah, just be careful. Is it a minimum, a maximum, or approximation that they're looking for, and what is that number? All right, well, I say this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but at this point, you have all the software you have available to you to make sure that your English spelling, grammar is in check. So that's the first step. Of course, have your spell checker on and make sure that your grammar is perfect. But at the same time, the computer tends to make errors sometimes. So your best bet is that after you've spell checked it on the computer, to have someone that you know has a strong level of English, preferably a native speaker, to proofread your essays. This is the best option. Also, particularly somebody who's either done an MBA or who works in the industry that you work in, so they really understand what you're talking about. Sometimes you may make references in your essay to things about what you're currently doing at work, and to a layman not in your industry, that might make no sense. So the ideal situation is somebody who is just your profile, who's a native speaker to read your essays. And here's a little trick. What you can do is to have that person read your essays without knowing what the question is. And if they can guess the question, then you've done your job. That's not a bad idea to do before you submit your essays officially. All right, considering the reader. So think about the person who's going to read your essays. First of all, first impressions are lasting. You want to make it count with what you say. You're sharing yourself. This is the first time you're putting your thoughts out there besides your meetings with the admissions officers, and you're hoping to catch their attention. You want them to understand what you're all about, what your goals are, and that you have an understanding of what the school has to offer. Each MBA program is going to offer something a little bit different, and you want to personalize those essays to make it that that school can know that you know what they're about and that there's a real match. Another thing I like to say is, I say lose the local lingo. What I mean is be aware of the local expressions that you might use on a daily basis that are in actuality very localized, very common to use where you're particularly from, but may not be as easily understood or could be viewed as very informal or even inappropriate in other parts of the world. So you want to think about using as standard of English as possible. I find myself saying this to people sometimes. To approach an MBA, it's a good idea to stop thinking like a local person from wherever you're from and start thinking like an international business person. And that translates on your CV, for example, when you put things like your phone number without indicating your country code. Why should we assume that why should you assume that we know the country that you're coming from just because of your name or maybe even your address? I mean, these things are not necessarily in alignment. You have people coming from one country that have a phone number that doesn't necessarily match their nationality. Well, take it that people don't assume these things. So yes, lose the local lingo is what I was saying. Try to stay with things that are more international and standard. Yes, as far as will you be seen as an asset or a liability, what does that mean? Well, you want them to understand that you're somebody who's going to be a strength for that program. And that will come through in how you write, the way you are able to, or not, articulate your ideas in a way that's clear and that you're going to have something to contribute to the class. You're obviously not going to an MBA program just to learn things, but you're also going to share things with the other people who are hoping to learn from you, especially in the smaller programs where it's a much more peer-to-peer teaching model, much more interactive rather than a large lecture. The strengths that each person brings to the table are invaluable, and each of you are going to teach one another from your professional background, from your particular corner of the world and your culture. You're going to have plenty of things to share with one another. So that's why you want the school to know that you're going to contribute and be a major asset to the program. Okay, what do you want and how do you plan to get there? This is part of what I call career mapping. I'm going to talk about that again a little bit more in a minute. But you know, laying out your ideas, showing that you have an idea of what you want, even though you know that you could totally change direction during the program, and in fact many people do, but you have to have a plan for yourself. So making it clear that you know what you want and that you have a plan is important. Sending a message that is clear is very important as well. You don't want people to be confused reading your essays, getting hung up on some technical jargon that may not be obvious to a person who's not working in your industry, these kind of things. So try to be as clear as possible. And again, your goals should match the program. So all in all, this is about considering the reader. Who's on the other side of those essays? You want to give them something that makes sense, that is clear, logical, enjoyable, and really shares who you are as best as possible. Okay, so mapping out your career, I thought I'd touch on this more. You need to be able to articulate your career goals in a way that is specific yet realistic. I find myself saying this very often. If you know me, I've probably said it already to you. Specific yet realistic. We need to know, what are your short, medium, and long-term goals? Your essays should indicate these things. In some cases, and I think many cases, schools will ask you this directly, but sometimes it's indirect. And read the question, you know, read it for its face value, and then look a little bit deeper. What is that question exactly asking you? What are they trying to glean from your essays? What's the takeaway? So essentially, they want to know what your goals are. What do you intend to do with this MBA? Why do you want to do an MBA? What's on the other side of it? Because nobody does an MBA just for the MBA itself. An MBA is not a goal, it's a vehicle to a goal. So we have to make sure it's the right vehicle for you. So we need to understand what your goals are, very specifically. And at the same time, it will be a sign of real professional maturity that your goals are also realistic. Sometimes people have a lot of changes in mind for their future, like moving to a new country, changing industries, or changing your function in the office. And all of these things are absolutely possible with an MBA. You start combining 2 or 3 or more of these changes at the same time, it starts to get a bit more complex. And honestly, it doesn't matter where you do your MBA, but if you have 4 career changes you have in mind at the same time, it's highly unlikely that you're going to do all of that at once. And the reason being is that companies need to be able to trust that you're going to be successful with them and to help take them to the next level. So if you have several major changes in mind, think about how to space that out over time. This is professional maturity, understanding that many changes don't happen all in one moment. And so making career moves that are strategic, where maybe the job you have immediately post-MBA is not the one you'll have in 5 years or 10 years, but there's certain steps that you've thought through. And this is what it means to map out your career. So I'll move on from here. All right. Teamwork, leadership. These are great things to highlight in your CV, conversations with any admissions reps, and definitely in your essays and later interview. Most MBA programs involve a lot of group work, teamwork, and indicating that you have the ability to work well in a team dynamic is very important. You want to make sure that you're not going to be a challenge to work with for everyone else in the program. People who are unable to do this make the MBA very unenjoyable for the others, and everything becomes difficult. So of course you want people who can work together as a team. So I mentioned sports here because a lot of times people who have experience on basketball, soccer, volleyball, hockey, and so on teams, these are skills. You know, they're sort of like trained in a way to work in a team dynamic. So that often translates from the field to the boardroom, to the office. So if you do play on a team sport, it's good to mention it on your CV and in your essays in some way. Not a bad idea. Obviously, it's not required, but if you're doing it, yeah, feel free to mention it. Also, leadership comes in many forms. The obvious one is managing people, but not everyone, especially some of the younger folks have not had a chance yet to manage teams of people yet. So leadership could come in forms of managing projects, project management, leading committees on various things, even organizations outside of the office. Could be in a volunteer organization, church group, team, musical group, and so on. So leadership, as it comes to you, as you have experience so far, mention it. That will help. So international experience is another major factor in helping your profile in terms of being accepted for an MBA program. International experience comes in a variety of forms. Could be that you've already studied in a foreign country or that you've worked in a foreign country. Perhaps you're working in your home country but for an international company, or you have clients overseas. Perhaps you speak multiple languages, your family is mixed nationalities. So these things are going to only help you. It plays into the value of diversity, the likelihood that you are more interculturally sensitive and able to work in a mixed environment, to get along with people from different cultures, to relate to them, especially if it's something like sales, marketing, consulting. This is all very important. And that's one of the things I think you'll find in Europe, by the way, where you have a continent with about 45, 50 little countries pushed together. These are a group of people collectively that are already very used to working in various languages, currencies, ways of doing business, and so on, cultures. So this is usually a strength of the European MBA, I should mention. And it often attracts, European MBAs often attract for that reason, other people from other regions of the world who are seeking that very diverse intercultural complexity of an experience that you can have in an MBA in Europe. And so that's, I think, what you'll find at ESSEC as well. So going back to the main point, highlight your international experiences. And as I remind you in the last point here, start thinking and speaking as an international business person. So think about how you are perceived by the others when you speak, when you write, and so on. And think about how to perhaps customize here and there yourself in such a way that you'll be perceived as more international. You probably have these skills there already, but maybe you're not catching yourself. So pay attention to these things. Tell a good story. So, as I mentioned already, we do read a lot of essays. Well, for each application, ESSEC has 3 essays, plus an optional one, so it can even be 4. So with that in mind, try to make our job more fun. We want to read essays that are interesting, that tell a story about you, that really paint a picture of who you are. For me, I've probably already met you, either in person or online or somewhere traveling. But for the admissions committee, they don't know you yet. So this is your first chance for them to get to know you and to really stand out. So try to tell something that's an interesting story. And again, you can have friends, colleagues, people who you trust, read your essays and ask them what they think. Is it retaining their interest, or should you spice it up a bit? Of course, I'm not saying invent things by any means, but how you write will play into it, especially, again, certain careers like sales and marketing. These areas tend to lend themselves to people with personalities that are good storytellers. Very much part of the branding thing, storytelling, and a theme that comes up often at ESSEC. So show your skill there. All right, this is the last slide, and this is just a little tip about CVs. I have been looking at CVs from all over the world, people from all different countries. As an English teacher in a few countries, Spain, Australia, and France, and in some previous roles that I've had where I've been doing some kind of CV/interview consulting, helping people to prepare an English or Anglophone CV or resume. So just to share a couple of final points before I go, CVs for me have, or let's say, are built on 3 main things. While I totally can respect that there's a cultural implication about CVs, I mean, depending on where you're from, that's going to impact how you will be instinctively preparing your CV. But think about where you're going to. So those 3 things, I would say, are the sector of business, the career field that you're working in, number 1. Number 2, your personality. And number 3, where in the world. These 3 factors will impact how you prepare your CV, generally speaking. So again, if you're applying for a position or a school that's outside of your country, keep that in mind. Many times the websites of the institutions where you might be applying for an MBA will indicate exactly how many pages they're looking for. You should definitely follow that advice. Particularly people who are engineers or highly technical fields, or from some countries in Asia, often it is more typical to have CVs that are 7, 8, 10 pages, and that's okay for that field and for those countries. But if you're applying for schools in Europe, often it is 1 page or 2 pages. So that is definitely the standard form for ESSEC. I mean, the idea that you can get all your career on 1 sheet of paper, 1 page, that's nice. To be able to summarize, to get to the point, this is actually a skill. So demonstrate that skill first with your CV. Okay, moving on. Of course, your name and contact info should be at the very top, easy to find. The main important things, first of all, your name, of course, an email address, your phone number, perhaps your actual home address, and your nationality. I think that's all I would put up there. We don't need to know. We don't need to know if you have a driver's license, unless you're going to drive to class every day. No, I'm joking. We don't need to know if you have a driver's license at all. A picture is optional, but really at the top, the key things are your full name, your email address, your phone number, perhaps your address, and definitely your nationality. And with your phone number, be sure to include the country code. Why should we assume whatever country you're from? Also, I don't think it's necessary to write the word email. I think we know what an email looks like. Same with telephone number. It's pretty clear on what that is when you put it there. So those things should be top of the first page, and preferably the only page. Okay, and next, your experiences, I think, is the professional experiences, I should say. And if you have had many, I would say relevant professional experiences. Having those in reverse chronological order is generally standard. We need to see the name of the company, where that happened, the position you had, and some of the key tasks or responsibilities that happened during that job. That's it. Again, summarizing, getting to the point. After that, education. I think is the next best thing, because this is a little bit older, right? Generally, when you're applying for an MBA, you have some experience, at least 3 years, average 7 years. So experience should come first, in my opinion, and then education, because this is going back a little bit later. And again, in reverse chronological order, like starting with your master's degree, for example, if that's what you have, then your bachelor's, weave in exchanges if you've had that there. And then the rest, which I would say most important is skills, which is often divided among language and computer. You can have volunteer experiences, you can have select presentations or publications if you've had, and perhaps a one-liner with personal interests. It gives just a little bit of personality to who you are. I think, of course we're all here as professionals, but we're still human, and it's nice to show something that, gives a little bit more color to your CV, especially, you never know. The person who's reading your CV could absolutely relate to one of your personal interests, such as if you're into scuba diving or classical piano, photography, any of those things. Just put a little one-liner with a few, 2, 3, 4 perhaps, personal interests. And I would say mention something specific. I wouldn't put like sports, because I think that's pretty general. It's really vague. Also, photography. I mean, I think everyone's a photographer these days. So if you're really into photography, if you're passionate about it, probably you have something that you're specifically interested, like landscape photography or black and white portraiture or something like that. Just some examples. I think being a little bit specific there is nice and makes it stand out a little bit more. PDF. Always, after all the formatting work and all the font design and everything you've done to your CV to make it just perfect, of course you must save it as a PDF, unless you're otherwise asked. But yes, save it as a PDF so it maintains the integrity of the file, and that will keep everything happy. I'll also mention something about margins. I know you're trying to squeeze a lot into 1 or 2 pages, and so sometimes those margins start to disappear. And I think it also gets a little bit uncomfortable when there are like almost no margins left. Previously, before computers, everything was on paper, and as we hold a piece of paper in our hands, what is blocking those margins? Your thumbs. And I think that we've gotten used to, our eyes visually, having a little bit of space. It's a little bit of comfort, So I suggest that you don't, decrease your margins so small that you have the words running off to the edge of the page. So, a good inch or so, like 2.5 centimeters, is a good idea, I think. I also think it's unnecessary to put at the bottom references upon request. Like, everyone knows that. There's no reason to write that. And finally, I would say be sure to include your CV or resume from the first time you contact somebody for a university or MBA program. There's no reason to make them ask you for it afterwards. When you contact somebody, you can just, write the message, and in the last line say, "For your convenience, I've attached my resume." That's a great gesture. That shows you're being proactive, that you're thinking, that you know what they're looking for, and that is a starting point with you. And that is, of course, your resume. That is the very most basic thing that we need to start a conversation with you, to understand that if you are appropriate for this program, and if this program is appropriate for you. So rather than make them wait, this is the best idea to do right from the beginning. Okay, so that wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you for watching. You have my contact information here, and I'm going to jump into questions now. There's a couple. I'll just expand this question section. Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading the question. One of the questions here says, do you think it's helpful to speak with current students to get insight on a school's culture and anecdotes in the essay? So first of all, yes. Thank you, Tim, for this question. I think it's absolutely a great idea to get in touch with current students. So if you have a way to do that yourself, I suggest you go right ahead and do that for the various schools that you're considering. If not, you can contact your recruitment manager or admissions counselor or whatever they're called at your school, and ask them if it's possible to be put in touch with current students or even alumni. You can also often find them via LinkedIn on your own. I will let you know, sometimes recruitment managers prefer to only put people who are in the process of the application in touch with current students, because you could probably imagine there can be many thousands of people who would like to talk to current students. And can you imagine how you might exhaust these current students if they're constantly having to respond to messages? So generally, it's the most serious applicants that are allowed to get in touch with current students and alumni. And there's a second part to Tim's question. Do you have an experience with peer-to-peer matching like HeyIvy.com? Sorry, I don't know Hey Ivy. So, no. Okay, next question. Ruth asks, should you show diversity of internships rather than go into detail into similar ones? Yeah, I mean, if they're in two different countries, particularly, I think it's interesting to mention that. I mean, it all plays into your intercultural experience. So if you've had internships in two different countries other than your own, I would mention both. Perhaps there's a way you can structure them into just one small section, like listing the internships together, with the name of the company, the country, and the function that you had during the internship. So yes, Ruth. So here's a question from Hader. If a school doesn't have an essay limit, is there a de facto limit we need to stick to, or can it vary from 400 words to 4,000 words? Oof, that's a big range, Hader. If a school doesn't give an essay limit, my instinct would be to contact the recruitment manager and ask them what they're looking for. Perhaps, I don't know, perhaps there could be an oversight that the school didn't remember to put a limit there, but they really would like one. I mean, feel free to ask. And again, this is the reason the recruitment managers are there. They're there to answer your questions. Of course, the first option is to go onto the website and do the research yourself, take some initiative and show some proactivity. But if you're not unable to find out the answer, please do ask the admissions rep or the manager what limit they prefer. And if they say there is no limit, then yeah, I would think if they're letting you kind of like go out on a limb and guess what limit you want, I think 500 words is a good range. 4,000 is a lot. So I'll leave it at that. Sneha asks, do you think we should mention the name of the current students we have interactions with in the essay? I don't see why not. I mean, I would maybe ask that student how they feel about being mentioned in your essays. But sure, if you want to make reference to somebody you know, it's kind of like name dropping in a way, like you know somebody, and that shows that either you know this person already and you have some kind of friendship relationship with them, and that you probably have a stronger idea of how the program works because you've asked them, or it's somebody that you've reached out to, and that even shows that you've taken the initiative to try to contact somebody who you don't even know to get that insight. So absolutely, I think it's a good idea. But I think it's a good idea also to ask first. And the last question so far is from Tapas, who asks, how to show relevance if one has never worked in a particular industry or role but wants to pursue the same post-MBA? Okay, so I think the question is, how can you show that your previous experience is going to connect with your goals in the future? And what I would say to that question is you try to, pave for yourself a career path that is logical. So you want to build on the skills and experiences that you've already had, combining with what you're going to learn during the MBA and the contacts that you make, and make that transition to the next career that you plan to have. So if you do find that it is a big change between now and whenever you'd start the MBA, I would do everything in my power to add additional experiences to my CV that can connect those dots. So it might seem difficult, but I'll just give you an example. Perhaps somebody who's working in finance wants to work in luxury brand management post-MBA. Okay, well, if that person has never worked for a luxury company before, luxury brand company, that could be a difficult transition. Finance is kind of numbers cold. It's a little bit different than the kind of passion that you'll find behind the brands, and especially in the luxury sector. So some things I suggest could be work in a boutique. You probably have a job already, but maybe part-time, like on Saturdays, once a week, working in a luxury brand boutique shop. That would give you direct experience with the brands, with the products, with how it works inside, and working with the clientele. That's the number one choice. Second, perhaps attending conferences about luxury items, probably in your city once a year, if not more, there are some kind of events or conferences centered around luxury brands. Next option could be to join an association. In most of the capital cities, there's for sure some kind of association about fans or aficionados, people who are really into luxury. And finally, blogs. Following blogs or even creating your own blog if you're interested. I mean, what these items do, what these activities do, they give you a couple of things. One, you have direct knowledge about the brands. You know the latest products that are coming out from each of the major brands. Second, who are the industry movers and shakers? Who are the top key players in each of the companies? Even some of the clients, if you're attending conferences, you'll see people who are also buying. So it's good to know that. And thirdly, it gives you a lot of the in-house vocabulary, all the little buzzwords that are, the latest things people are talking about, the latest trends, and having that vocabulary, it gets you credibility. It shows that you're up to date, that you're paying attention, that you're, So anyway, if you're somebody who's, transitioning into a totally different field post-MBA, I think it's a good idea to align yourself with that next career. So think about wherever career field you're going to and what you could do either in your current role, perhaps taking on some different responsibilities, perhaps shifting direction a little bit in your current job that would allow you to acquire these activities that you could actually mention somehow in your CV and in your essays and interview. So I hope that answers your question. There are two more that have popped up. So Ajit asks, what is generally expected from an essay? It was pretty open-ended, Ajit. If you review the presentation, which will be available online on Beat the GMAT archive, you can read what I just spoke about. But basically, you're writing this essay to articulate your ideas and your career mapping, showing your short, medium, and long-term goals, what function you'd like to have in your next job, what sector of business, where in the world you want to be. These are most of the things that you want to talk about. Also answering the question if it's something specific rather than just an open-ended essay, showing knowledge of the program or the school that you're applying to, showing that you, the school, are a match, and how you plan to use what you learn to take your career to the next level. These are the main things that you want to talk about. Ruth asks another question. Do I think it's a good idea to name drop people you've spoken with from the school, alumni or professors? Yes, definitely. Sure. If you visited campus or if you've been in touch with any alum or professors, yeah, why not? It certainly couldn't hurt, and I think it can only help you to mention that you've spoken with this or that person, and therefore you have further insight about the program and about the institution, and that it's even more clear that this is the right program for you. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, getting the right people in those seats. So there's a lot of people out there looking to do an MBA. There's certainly a lot of programs out there, and that whole matching, it's almost like a speed dating process to get the right people into the right program is really what my job is all about in the admissions office as well. So if you have additional insight that you've gained from that, I would absolutely mention that you met these people, whether it's in your essay or with the admissions people during the interview. Okay, so see one more question from Hader. Would it be better to spend words telling a personal story about growing from a traumatic past or event, or should we try to keep it professional and professional goals and passions? That's a good question, Hader. He's asking basically, should we only talk about professional experiences during the essays, or can we talk about life experiences which are more on the personal side? Well, whether traumatic experiences or not so traumatic, I think personal experiences are part of our lives, and if they've impacted you in some way, that's helped you grow as a person and professionally, that could be relevant. First of all, and it goes back to the first slide, which is pay attention to the question. I'm going to back it up if I can. If I can. Be sure to answer the question. The very first thing. Again, in all the excitement and nervousness of writing your essays, people tend to get off track. So it's going to come back to that. Being sure to answer the question where you can have a deeper understanding if it's okay to talk about personal experiences. Sometimes the essay question will specifically say something in your personal life. So answer that question. If it's open-ended, I don't see why not. including something from your personal life that has impacted you and that you've learned from and overcome. That's a recurring theme in essays, I would say. Okay, so there's another question here. Most essays, sorry, this is from Isha. Most essays I see are based on one major life event and not a series of experiences. How do you think I can make my essay more appealing by not just basing it on one particular event, but a series of experiences? Again, Isha, this goes back to being sure to answer the question. And if you're doubting, speak to the admissions rep from that school or the recruitment manager. Tell them that, you know, you see the question is like this and you'd like to answer it in such a way, would that be appropriate? And they'll tell you yes or no. So it is about 40 minutes since we started. If there's any further questions, I will take them. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. But I'd just like to mention that you have my contact information here. And if you are interested in applying to either of the ESSEC MBAs, either the Global MBA, the International Luxury Brand Management MBA, or the Hospitality MBA, you can definitely get in touch with me. And of course, we have plenty of information on the website. If you are applying for any of these programs, it is obviously expected that you've completely read all the information on the website, including the FAQ section, so you're fully informed. And if there are things above and beyond that, I'm definitely available to support you. Beyond that, as I mentioned, those of you who have attended the webinar live today, I see 49 people who have attended live today, are eligible for an application fee waiver if you're applying for the Global MBA. And if you recall, I offered a contest in the beginning. If you've caught the error during the presentation, it was on one of the slides, tell me what page it was from, and I'd be happy to give you some initial feedback on your essays. So we're going to end it there. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it was helpful, and I look forward to receiving your application essays. Bye-bye.